Talladega looming on the horizon, everybody is talking about how there's going to be good racing to come. And I hate to be the Debbie Downer here in terms of that, and I'm not trying to say that Talladega is going to have bad racing. I'm here to talk about some of the worst Talladega races, and just to prepare ourselves for a negative Talladega race. I don't wish that that's going to happen, and I don't expect that to happen. But if we get a repeat of the 2021 Daytona 500, what could we expect? And I think we could probably expect one of the worst Talladega races to ever happen. This took place in 2018, and this is what we're going to be revisiting in this video. So let's set the scene for this doomsday race at Talladega Superspeedway. To start off, it was the second race in the round of 12, and as many of you know, the round of 12 is where 12 drivers duke it out to try and see who makes it into the round of 8, inevitably the championship 4. The previous week at Dover International Speedway, Chase Elliott managed to nab the win over an eliminated Denny Hamlin, and he nabbed out guys like Joey Logano and Kurt Busch. The big three, such as Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr., had not yet capitalized on their opportunity and had not yet shown that they were championship caliber drivers. And guys like Alex Bowman and Clint Bowyer had mediocre races crashing out at Dover, and were looking for vengeance at Talladega. The playoff bubble entering into the race had Logano, Kurt Busch, and Keselowski all peaking above the cutoff line, with Blaney, Almirola, Bowyer, and Larson all hovering around it. And Alex Bowman had put himself into a near must-win situation. If he crashed at Talladega, it was over for Bowman. And if any of the guys crashed underneath this cutoff line, it was over for them. Almirola, Bowyer, and Larson knew they needed to do something good, and Blaney knew that he needed to play the offense in order to keep those guys out of round of 8 contention. So entering into the 2018 1000bulbs.com 500, there were a lot of storylines, to say the least, and it was going to be an interesting race from the get-go. At least, that's what a lot of people hoped for and expected. Qualifying came and went, and it had featured Kurt Busch sitting on the pole with Clint Bowyer to the outside. And behind Clint Bowyer was Kevin Harvick in third and Eric Almirola in fourth. This would be indicative of things to come. Unlike their 2021 season has gone thus far, Stewart-Haas Racing was a powerhouse team that everybody wouldn't want to mess with. And that was apparent from the drop of the green, as Stewart-Haas Racing quickly filed into a 4-car train. Tandem drafting was kind of a thing of the past at this point, and it is still a thing of the past. But they sure did cause a barrier, and nobody could pull around to try and pass them. So, the field submitted and just quietly rode around the back behind the Stewart-Haas Racing train. And the next guy did, and the next guy did, and pretty quickly you got single file train racing at Talladega Superspeedway. Kurt Busch dominated the first 12 laps of the race, and it seemed like a race where you could sleep and wake up and not miss any piece of action. But on lap 12, Jeffrey Earnhardt caused the first incident-related caution of the day. It seemed like Stewart-Haas Racing would come down onto pit road, and then everybody would try and find their spots and pass Stewart-Haas Racing, and then the field would be shuffled, and then the first 12 laps would be long forgotten, and we would forget about this train racing that we saw in those first 12 laps. But Bowyer executed a good pit stop, Kurt Busch executed a good pit stop, Eric Almirola executed a good pit stop, and Kevin Harvick executed a good pit stop. And all 4 of them continued to stay in the top 4 as the field were scrambling to find their feet. And they pulled away once again. Kurt Busch was still the man to beat, and he continued to be the man to beat for the entirety of the day, sitting on the pole. And for Talladega standards, this is completely out of the ordinary. It's not every day you see the pole sitter even leading lap 1 of the Talladega race. And to lead like 30 laps of the race at Talladega Superspeedway is quite a feat in and of itself. Towards the end of stage 1, Stewart-Haas Racing had pulled away from the pack like a freight train. It seemed impossible to do in the modern era of NASCAR to completely pull away from the field, but SHR did it with ease. And what they also did with ease is not crashing each other out of the race. They were conservative, and they kept being conservative. Their starting order from the restart of Jeffrey Earnhardt's spin to the finishing order of stage 1 was a carbon cut copy and was the exact same. They didn't crash out of aggression. So Kurt Busch would win the stage, Bowyer would finish second, Harvick would finish third, and Almirola would finish fourth. They would garner the necessary points they needed to, and the field would be jumbled back up together.
Back, the 14's backing up to the 4, trying to get a run.
Look at the 10 trying to check to the outside. Does he have a run? He gets to the outside of the 4. Will he try to side draft him? He can't get to the quarter panel. They come through the tri-oval for the final time, and it looks as though it's going to be close.
If you thought Stewart-Haas Racing was going to stumble on their pit stop, you would actually not be wrong. You would be right. They stumbled on their pit stop. But, just like every great team does, they picked their feet right back up. And while Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano controlled the restart, it wasn't long before Clint Bowyer, Kevin Harvick, and Kurt Busch were hot on Ryan Blaney's heels. And they continued to chase him. And it seemed like they were going to be making a quick and swift pass on him before Jimmy Johnson spun and brought out the second incident-related caution of the day. Johnson's spin sparked a multitude of cars coming down onto the pit road, which wasn't a bad strategy by any stretch of the imagination. Considering the immense long green flag runs that the field was experiencing, coming down to pit road was a necessity. It wasn't long before train racing would be experienced by the field, and Kevin Harvick would be in first, with Bowyer following him, Almirola in third, and Kurt Busch decided to lay it back and take it easy this stage. It seemed like the entirety of the stage would go green once again with only one incident-related caution. But thanks to Kyle Larson, he would bring an accident on the backstretch, and it would be the third incident of the day. Penske was once again the biggest challenger to Stewart-Haas Racing's throne, but it wouldn't be enough. And Stewart-Haas Racing would pull away in a freight train, and they would continue to dominate the rest of Stage 2 up until the end of the stage. And Kevin Harvick would be the benefactor this time at the conclusion of Stage 2.
Turn 4 before they come into the tri-oval. What an incredibly dominant performance we've seen from Stewart-Haas Racing through the first 2 stages. This time it's Kevin Harvick. They stay in line again.
And so Stage 3 would go green. A lot of people were dying to go to the next race the next week at Kansas Motor Speedway. People abhorred this race from the moment the green flag had dropped and Stewart-Haas Racing had started to dominate. And there wasn't even a question. Nobody had even expected Stewart-Haas Racing to just come out here at Talladega and be this good. As for Stage 3, well, Penske continued to try and fight Stewart-Haas, and they actually succeeded in doing so. Brad Keselowski stayed ahead of the Stewart-Haas Racing pack, and Stewart-Haas was as conservative as ever. They didn't try and pass him, they just laid back like a cougar preying on his prey. Jamie McMurray would spin and bring the 4th incident-related caution of the day, and his spin would also jumble up the field and put them back together once more. Pit stops would ensue, just like I previously mentioned, and Stewart-Haas Racing would succeed on pit stops. And for the entirety and the rest of this race, it seemed like everything was going to be normal. There wasn't going to be any absurd passes or daring moves for the lead. It was going to be a boring Talladega race. Boring and Talladega, by any means, don't go together in the same sentence. And for a lot of fans, this race was a misery to watch. And as the laps wind down and a debris caution came and went, with Stewart-Haas Racing continuing to do well on pit stops and going out there and dominating the race, it seemed like the insufferable race was going to be coming to an end. 4 laps to go, Stewart-Haas Racing was a 4-car tango. But just when it seemed like Stewart-Haas Racing was going to pull away, not do anything for the lead, and let Kevin Harvick possibly win this race, big accident ensued off of turn 4, involving the 24 of William Byron, the 88 of Alex Bowman, the 23, the 20 of Eric Jones, and the 9 of Chase Elliott. For Bowman, this crash was absolutely horrible, as it had put him behind the 8 ball, and eventually it would be the fall of Alex Bowman's round of 12 appearance. For Chase Elliott, it didn't make much of a difference. As I previously mentioned, he had already won, so he had some insurance entering into this race. Now it was down to crunch time. One final restart to decide who was going to win this race. Stewart-Haas Racing had decided that they were going to be staying out and they were not going to come down to pit road. And just like that, the rest of the field didn't. This would prove to be an ineffective strategy, as right before the green for 2 laps to go, Kevin Harvick ran out of fuel. And this is where Stewart-Haas Racing's problems would end up starting. They only had 3 men left to do the battle and do the dirty work, holding the fort down for the entire organization. And Kurt Busch, as ever, was leading the charge and doing all he could at the front of the field. It wasn't long, however, before the rest of the field was quickly catching up. And like a blue whale eating krill, they swallowed up Clint Bowyer quickly. Kurt Busch and Aric Almirola were pulling away, and now there was only 2 Stewart-Haas Racing drivers left. Coming out of turn 4, Kurt Busch lost the draft and went down the bottom lane. 3 SHR drivers gone in 2 laps when they dominated 90% of the race. It was safe to say that execution was definitely their weak suit. Nonetheless, however, Aric Almirola would win the race and advance into the round of 8. It would end up helping Stewart-Haas Racing, and if you thought this was the end of the organization, you're dead wrong. All 4 of them ended up making it into the round of 8. They made half of the spots in the round of 8. In fact, this Talladega race was a good points day for SHR. They dominated stage 1 and stage 2, they just failed to execute. They still got a lot of points at the end of the day. But for the fans and the viewing experience, this was an absolutely horrendous race. And it was a race that we would never see. And it was a race that we would never see again, as the aero package changed to what we have today. And it's fairly good racing. I'm honestly glad that we don't have to go back to that 2018 Talladega fall race. And if you ask any fan, this is probably the worst Talladega race ever. So what did you think of this race? Did you absolutely hate it? Or did you absolutely enjoy it? Let me know in the comments below. And till next time, this has been the news. I'll see ya.